In a quiet city of Enugu, there lived a woman named Okiki. The street where she lived was not big. It was the small house at the end of the street, the house where Okiki lived with her 2 children. People in the area knew her well. Some people called her Mama Ibuka. Some simply called her that quiet widow. But those who truly knew her had another name for her. They called her something different, something that carried both respect and mystery. They called her the woman who prays. Because almost every night, long after the whole neighborhood had fallen asleep, Okiki could still be heard whispering prayers inside her room. Sometimes her voice was soft, sometimes it was filled with tears. Sometimes it was strong and commanding, like someone fighting an invisible battle. But people did not always know her story. They did not know how that prayer life began. They did not know the pain that pushed her to her knees. Many years earlier, Okiki had not been a widow. In fact, she had been one of the happiest young wives in that same neighborhood. Her husband's name was Chukudi. Chukudi was a hard-working civil engineer, tall, handsome, always smiling. He had the kind of laughter that filled a whole room, and he loved Okiki deeply. When they first got married, they had many dreams. Sometimes in the evenings, they would sit outside their small rented apartment and talk about the future. Chukudi would say, "One day I will build you a big house, Okiki, a very big one." Okiki would laugh. "A big house for only 2 people?" Chukudi would shake his head. "Who said 2? We will have many children running everywhere." Okiki would playfully slap his arm. "Slow down, oh." They dreamed together. They planned together. They struggled together. When their first child was born, Chukudi cried like a baby in the hospital. The nurse laughed. "Why are you crying? Your wife is the one that gave birth." Chukudi wiped his tears proudly. "My son is here." They named the boy Ibuka. 3 years later, their daughter Dora was born. Their small house became full of laughter, baby cries, toy noises, and the sound of Chukudi singing funny songs to make the children laugh. Life was not perfect. Money was sometimes tight, but they were happy. They believed the future would only get better. They were wrong. One evening, heavy rain fell across Enugu. The sky was dark, thunder rolled across the clouds. Okiki was at home feeding little Dora while Ibuka played with a small toy truck on the floor. She kept looking at the door. Chukudi usually returned from work by 6 p.m., but that day it was already 7 p.m. The rain kept falling harder. Suddenly, her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Her heart began to beat faster. She answered, "Hello?" A strange voice spoke. "Madam, are you related to Mr. Chukudi?" Okiki's stomach tightened. "Yes, he is my husband." There was silence on the line. Then the man spoke slowly. "There has been an accident." The spoon fell from her hand. "What accident?" Her voice was shaking now. The man hesitated before speaking again. "You should come to the hospital immediately." The journey to the hospital felt like a nightmare. Her neighbor rushed her there on a motorcycle through the heavy rain. When they arrived, doctors and nurses were running around. She kept asking, "Where is my husband?" Nobody answered at first. Finally, a doctor approached her with a sad face. "Madam," that was the moment she knew. Somehow, her heart already knew. The doctor spoke softly. "We tried our best." Okiki stared at him. Her ears were ringing. The world felt like it had suddenly gone silent. "Your husband did not survive the accident." The words echoed in her mind. "Did not survive, did not survive, did not survive." Okiki screamed, a cry so deep that everyone in the hospital turned to look. Her knees gave way and she collapsed on the floor. She was only 29 years old and her life had just shattered. The burial was painful. Friends came, neighbors came, relatives came. Everyone cried. Everyone said comforting words. But after the burial, everyone returned to their lives. And Okiki was left alone. Alone with 2 small children. Ibuka was 5 years old. Dora was only 3. Sometimes, Ibuka would ask innocent questions. "Mommy, when is Daddy coming back?" Okiki would smile painfully. "Daddy is with God." "Will he come back tomorrow?" Her throat would tighten. "No, my son, but he is watching over us." A few weeks later, some of Chukudi's relatives visited. They sat in the sitting room discussing serious matters. One elderly uncle cleared his throat. "Okiki, Raising children alone is not easy. Okiki listened quietly. We think it is better if the boy comes to live with us in the village. Okiki's eyes slowly lifted. What do you mean? The man sighed. You are still young. Life is hard. Let us train him. Okiki understood what they were saying. They believed she was too weak to raise her children alone. She looked at them calmly. Then she spoke quietly but firmly. My children will grow under my roof. The room became silent. One aunt shook her head. You are stubborn. Okiki stood up slowly. God will help me raise them. And she meant every word. The first night after everyone left, Okiki could not sleep. The house was too quiet. Chukwudi's empty space on the bed hurt her heart. Tears rolled down her face. She did not know what to do. She did not know how she would survive. Suddenly, she remembered something Chukwudi used to say. Whenever life becomes too heavy, talk to God. So that night, Okiki did something she had never done before. She knelt beside her bed and she began to pray. At first, the words were weak. God, help me. Then the tears came, hot tears falling on the floor. God, I cannot do this alone. That night, she prayed for almost 2 hours. When she finally stood up, something had changed. Her problems had not disappeared, but her heart felt lighter. From that night, prayer became her weapon. Years passed. Okiki developed a habit. Every night, around 12 midnight, she woke up, quietly, so she would not wake the children. She knelt beside her bed and she began to pray. Sometimes she whispered scriptures, Lord, you are the father of the fatherless. Sometimes she cried, protect my children. Sometimes she prayed with authority, no evil will touch my family. Her neighbors often noticed the light in her room. One woman once told another neighbor, that widow does not sleep, oh? The other woman replied, she sleeps, but she also prays. But nobody truly understood the battle she was fighting. Battles no one could see. Battles only heaven could understand. Life was not easy. Okiki worked as a secretary in a medium-sized firm in the city. Her salary was small, very small. Every morning she woke up at 5 a.m. She prepared breakfast, packed the children's lunch, dressed them for school, then rushed to catch a bus to work. The buses were always crowded. Sometimes she stood for the entire journey, but she never complained. When she returned home in the evening, she was always tired, but the work continued. She helped Ibuka with homework, she braided Dora's hair, she cooked dinner, and when the children finally slept, her prayer began again. Years passed quickly. Ibuka grew into a tall, handsome boy, very intelligent. Books were his best friends. He loved mathematics. Science fascinated him. His teachers admired him greatly. Whenever a difficult question appeared in class, the teacher would say, Ibuka, come and solve this. And he always did. Dora was different. She was lively, always laughing, always dancing around the house. She loved caring for people. Mommy, when I grow up, I will become a nurse proudly, she often said. Despite their struggles, the house was filled with laughter. But there were still difficult days. Some nights, dinner was only gari and groundnuts. Sometimes, Okiki secretly skipped meals so the children could eat well. But she never complained. Instead, she prayed more.
One afternoon, Okiki was at work typing a report when her phone rang. It was Ibuka. Mommy! He shouted excitedly. Okiki frowned. Why are you shouting like that? Mommy, I got admission. Her fingers froze on the keyboard. What did you say? I got admission into the university. Before she could respond, another call entered. It was Dora. Mommy, me too. I got admission. For a moment, Okiki could not speak. Her hands began to shake. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Both of her children had gained admission the same year. Ibuka into engineering, Dora into nothing. That night, Okiki did not pray with tears. She prayed with songs. Songs of thanksgiving. Her voice echoed through the small house. Thank you, Lord. But university life was expensive. Very expensive. School fees, books, accommodation, feeding, transportation. Okiki knew her salary alone was not enough. So she began working harder. She started typing projects for students at night. She sold snacks at the office. Sometimes she stayed awake until 2 a.m. finishing typing jobs. But she never complained. Whenever exhaustion tried to break her, she remembered one thing: my children must succeed. Finally, the day came. Ibuka and Dora packed their bags for university. Before they left, Okiki called them into the sitting room. She placed her hands on their heads and she prayed, "Lord, these children are yours more than they are mine. Protect them, guide them, deliver them from evil. Let nothing steal their destiny." Neither Ibuka nor Dora understood the depth of that prayer, because somewhere on that university campus, danger was quietly approaching. When Ibuka first entered the university gate, he felt something he had never felt before: freedom. The university was like a small city on its own. Tall buildings stood proudly across the campus. Students walked everywhere in groups, laughing, arguing, discussing assignments, or rushing to lectures. Motorcycles zoomed past, music played loudly from hostel windows. Vendors shouted near the gates, selling roasted corn, shawarma, and cold drinks. For Ibuka, it felt like stepping into a completely new world. Back home in Enugu, life had always been simple, quiet, disciplined, structured by his mother's rules and prayers. But here, everything felt bigger, everything felt louder, everything felt faster. He carried his small bag on his shoulder as he walked across the campus that first day. Inside his heart, he made a silent promise: "Mommy did not suffer for nothing. I must succeed here." The first lecture Ibuka attended was engineering mathematics. The lecture hall was large and packed with students. Some students sat on the window frames, some sat on the floor. Some were chatting loudly, others were already sleeping before the lecture even started. Ibuka quietly found a seat close to the front. He opened his notebook. Then the lecturer entered, a tall, serious-looking man with glasses. He walked straight to the board without greeting anyone. Then he began writing complex equations. After a few minutes, he suddenly turned around. "Who can solve this?" Silence filled the hall. Students looked at each other. Some bent their heads, pretending to write. Others avoided eye contact. The lecturer sighed. First-year students, already afraid of mathematics. A quiet voice spoke. "Sir, I can try." Everyone turned. It was Ibuka. The lecturer looked surprised. "Come." Ibuka walked to the board calmly. Within 2 minutes, he solved the entire equation. The lecturer stared at the board. Then he smiled. "Interesting." He turned to the class. "Everyone copy this solution." Then he pointed at Ibuka. "What is your name?" "Ibuka Okafosa." The lecturer nodded slowly. "Good. Very good." From that day, everyone began to notice him. Within weeks, Ibuka's name became known across his department. Lecturers began to recognize him immediately. Whenever there was a difficult question, they would say, "Ibuka, stand up." And he always had the answer. His assignments were always neat, his calculations were always correct, his projects were always impressive. One lecturer even told the class one day, "If many of you studied like Ibuka, this department would produce more engineers." Some students clapped, others shook their heads in amazement. Ibuka was not proud, he was simply focused. Every evening, after lectures, he went to the library. While other students were watching movies or playing games in the hostel, Ibuka was reading textbooks. Whenever he felt tired, he remembered his mother. He remembered the nights she prayed. He remembered the sacrifices she made. And that memory pushed him to work harder. But Ibuka's intelligence was not the only thing that attracted attention. He was also tall, handsome, and confident. Soon, the girls began to notice him. One afternoon after a lecture, a group of girls approached him. "Excuse me," said one of them shyly, "are you the Ibuka that solved the mathematics question in class yesterday?" Ibuka smiled politely. "Yes," another girl laughed. "So, you are the famous mathematician?" Ibuka scratched his head. "I am just trying my best." From that day, girls began to greet him everywhere, in the cafeteria, in the library, in the corridors. Some asked for help with assignments. Some simply wanted to talk. His roommates even began to tease him. One evening, his friend Sadiq laughed loudly. "Ibuka, this school will finish you." Ibuka frowned. "What do you mean?" Sadiq shook his head dramatically. "The girls chasing you alone can fill one hostel block." The room burst into laughter. But Ibuka remained careful. His mother's voice often echoed in his mind, "Choose your friends wisely." But while many students admired Ibuka for good reasons, some people were watching him for a completely different reason. a dangerous reason. One evening, inside a dark corner behind one of the hostel buildings, a group of final year students sat together, 5 of them. Their faces were serious. A bottle of alcohol sat on the table. One of them spoke. "That boy." Another nodded. "Yes, I have been watching him. He is intelligent and bold." One of them leaned forward. "He will make a good member." They were not ordinary students. They were members of a secret underworld group operating quietly within the university. A group feared by many, respected by some, but avoided by wise students. Their leader, a tall, muscular man called Blade, spoke slowly. "We need new blood." Another member nodded. "This boy has influence. Lecturers like him. Students respect him." Blade smiled slightly. "Exactly." He took a slow sip from the bottle. "Bring him." The first time they approached Ibuka was outside the library. It was around 8 p.m. The campus was already becoming quiet. Ibuka stepped outside the library carrying his books. As he walked towards his hostel, 2 men suddenly blocked his path. Both looked older, probably final year students. One of them smiled. "You are Ibuka, right?" Ibuka hesitated. "Yes." "We have been hearing good things about you." Ibuka remained silent. The other man stepped closer. "We belong to a group of influential students on campus." Ibuka's stomach tightened slightly. "We think someone like you will fit in very well." Ibuka understood immediately. His heart began to beat faster. He had heard stories about these groups. Dangerous stories. Stories of violence. Stories of blood. He shook his head. "I am not interested." The 2 men looked at each other. One of them laughed softly. "You are not interested?" "Yes." The man smiled again, but this time the smile looked colder. "We are not asking you to think about it." He leaned closer. "We are telling you to consider it carefully." Ibuka walked away quickly, without replying, but as he walked, his heart was beating loudly. Something about that conversation felt wrong, very wrong. Later that night in the hostel, Ibuka told his roommate Sadiq about the encounter. Sadiq's face became serious immediately. "They approached you?" "Yes." Sadiq stood up. "You must be careful." "Why?" Sadiq lowered his voice. "Those boys are underworld." Ibuka's chest tightened. "They do not take rejection lightly." Ibuka swallowed. "I already told them I am not interested." Sadiq sighed. "I hope they leave you alone." But deep inside, even Sadiq was not sure. Over the next few days, Ibuka began to notice something strange. Sometimes when he walked across campus, he felt eyes watching him. One afternoon, while doing the cafeteria, he saw the same 2 men standing near a tree. They were watching him. Another evening, near the hostel gate, he saw them again, watching, always watching. They never approached him again, but their presence alone made him uncomfortable. One night, Sadiq whispered, "Ibuka, these people do not forget." Ibuka tried to stay calm. "I am not afraid." But inside, a small seed of fear had already begun to grow. A few nights later, the underworld group gathered again in their secret meeting place. Blade sat quietly while the others spoke. He refused. Blade looked up slowly. "So, what do we do?" Blade smiled coldly. "Some people must be shown that refusal is not an option." Another member nodded. "Tonight?" Blade shook his head. "Not yet." He leaned back in his chair. "Let him think he is safe." The room became silent. Then Blade spoke again. But soon, his eyes darkened. Very soon. Meanwhile, Ibuka continued his normal life, attending lectures, studying in the library, helping classmates with assignments. He tried to forget about the strange encounter, but danger was quietly building around him. Because somewhere on that campus, a group of dangerous young men had already made a decision, and they were not the type of people who accepted rejection. One night, very soon, they would come for him, and that night would change everything. Because while Ibuka slept peacefully in his hostel, miles away in Enugu, his mother, Okiki, would suddenly wake up from sleep, her spirit troubled, her heart restless, and she would begin to pray, not knowing that her prayers were about to face their greatest test, and that the battle for her son's life had already begun. The night began like every other night on campus. Nothing felt unusual, nothing felt dangerous. Ibuka had spent most of the evening in the university library. The library was one of his favorite places on campus. It was quiet, peaceful, and filled with the smell of books and old wooden tables. Rows of students sat silently reading. Some whispered softly while discussing assignments. Others stared tiredly at their laptops. Ibuka sat at his usual corner near the window, surrounded by textbooks and notebooks. He had been studying engineering mechanics for almost 3 hours. Numbers filled his pages, equations covered his notebook. But Ibuka was happy. He loved learning. Every time he solved a difficult problem, a small smile appeared on his face. Around 9:15 p.m., he stretched his arms and closed his notebook. Okay, enough for today, he muttered. He packed his books carefully into his bag. Outside the library windows, the night had already settled across the campus. The campus was beginning to grow quiet. Most students had already returned to their hostels. Ibuka stepped outside the library building. He inhaled deeply. The night air felt cool and refreshing after hours inside the library. He adjusted the strap of his backpack and began walking toward his hostel. The path from the library to his hostel was about a 10-minute walk. Ibuka had walked that road many times. He knew every corner, every lamppost, every tree along the path. But that night felt strangely different, too quiet. The wind rustled the leaves softly. Somewhere in the distance, a generator hummed, but the walkway itself was almost empty. Ibuka continued walking calmly. He was thinking about the assignment he needed to submit the next day. But then, something strange happened. He heard the sound of a car engine behind him. That was unusual. Cars rarely drove through that narrow walkway at night. Ibuka turned slightly. A black vehicle was slowly approaching. Its headlights were dim. The car moved quietly like a shadow. Ibuka frowned slightly. Maybe someone was just driving through campus. He ignored it and continued walking. But suddenly, the car sped up and stopped directly beside him. Before Ibuka could even react, the doors of the car flew open. Two large men jumped out instantly. Everything happened so fast. One of them grabbed Ibuka's arm violently. The other covered his mouth. Ibuka struggled immediately. "Hey, what are you doing?" But his voice was muffled. Another man jumped out of the back seat. Together, they forced him toward the vehicle. Ibuka kicked wildly. He tried to free himself. He tried to scream, but the grip on his mouth was tight. Students walking far away only saw a car parked briefly. No one understood what was happening. No one heard the struggle. Within seconds, Ibuka was dragged into the back seat. The door slammed shut. The car sped off into the darkness. Ibuka's heart was beating like a drum. His hands were held tightly. His breathing was heavy. Inside the car sat 5 dangerous-looking young men. Their faces were hard, cold. One of them was smoking. Another one laughed softly. The man sitting in the front passenger seat slowly turned around. It was Blade, the underworld leader. Ibuka recognized him immediately. Blade stared at him for a few seconds, then he smiled. But it was not a friendly smile. It was a cold, dangerous smile. "Good evening, genius." Ibuka's voice trembled. "Please, let me go." Blade chuckled. "Let you go." He leaned closer. "You think life is that simple?" Another underworld member slapped Ibuka hard on the head. "Shut up." Blade raised his hand calmly. "Easy. Don't damage him yet." He looked directly into Ibuka's frightened eyes. Then he said slowly, "Welcome to your initiation." The words echoed inside Ibuka's head. Initiation. His worst fear had just become reality. Tears filled Ibuka's eyes. "Please, I don't want to join your group." One of the men laughed loudly. "You think this is something you choose?" Another one said mockingly. "Everybody says that at first." Ibuka's voice broke. "My mother will die if anything happens to me." Blade's expression did not change. He simply leaned back in his seat. "You should have thought about that before rejecting us." Ibuka shook his head desperately. "I didn't mean any disrespect. I just want to focus on my studies." Another underworld member leaned forward angrily. "You think you are better than us because you read books?" Ibuka quickly shook his head. "No, that's not what I meant." The car continued speeding down a lonely road outside the campus. The deeper they drove into the darkness, the more terrified Ibuka became. His mind raced. He thought about his mother. He remembered her prayers. He remembered the way she held his head and prayed before he left home. Suddenly, his voice became shaky. "God, please help me." Miles away in Enugu, the night was peaceful. Most houses in the neighborhood had already gone dark. Inside her small house, Okiki lay asleep on her bed. Her breathing was slow and steady. But suddenly, her eyes opened. She sat up abruptly. Her heart was beating fast, very fast. Something felt wrong, very wrong. She placed her hand on her chest. Jesus! Her spirit felt restless. It felt as if something terrible was happening somewhere connected to her. She glanced at the clock, 12:17 a.m. Her midnight prayer time, but tonight felt different. A strange fear gripped her heart. She could not explain it, but deep inside her spirit, she sensed danger, serious danger. She got out of bed immediately. Her legs felt weak, but she knelt on the floor beside her bed. Okiki raised her trembling hands. "Lord," her voice cracked. "Something is wrong." Tears began to fall down her face. Her breathing became heavier. She could feel the battle in her spirit. Something was happening, something dangerous. She lifted her voice louder. Father, wherever my son is right now, cover him. Tears soaked her wapa. Every evil plan against my children, scatter it. Her prayers became stronger, more urgent, more desperate. She began to pray in deep spiritual intensity. Every trap set for my son tonight, let it fail. Car continued moving deeper into the bush road. Ibuka's fear had reached its peak. He was shaking. One of the underworld members laughed. Relax, nobody dies during initiation. Another added with a wicked grin. Well, most people don't. The car finally slowed down. They had arrived at a lonely bush area outside the campus. Blade opened the door. Bring him out. Two men grabbed Ibuka roughly. They dragged him out of the vehicle. The night air felt cold against his skin. Dark trees surrounded the area. There were no houses, no lights, no people, just darkness and danger. Ibuka's legs trembled. Please, don't do this. But no one listened. The underworld members surrounded him. One of them held a stick. Another carried a bottle. Blade stepped forward slowly. The ceremony begins. Back in Enugu, Okiki's prayers had become intense. Her voice filled the small room. Her tears soaked the floor. Lord, fight for my son tonight, she cried louder. Wherever he is, send help. Her body shook with the intensity of her prayers. She did not know what was happening, but heaven knew, because far away in that dark bush, something unexpected was about to happen. Something that would shock everyone. Something that would prove one powerful truth, that when a mother prays with all her heart, heaven listens. And sometimes, heaven intervenes. Blade stepped forward slowly. His boots crushed the dry leaves beneath his feet. He stared at Ibuka like a hunter staring at trapped prey. Tonight, Blade said calmly, you will become one of us. Ibuka's voice cracked immediately. I don't want to join your group. One of the underworld boys laughed loudly. You still think you have a choice? Another one pushed Ibuka violently. On your knees. Ibuka hesitated. Immediately, a heavy slap landed across his face. The sound echoed in the bush. Did you not hear him? Slowly, painfully, Ibuka dropped to his knees. The ground was rough and covered with sharp stones. Pain shot through his legs, but that pain was nothing compared to the fear crushing his heart. Blade nodded. Good. One of the underworld boys brought out a bottle filled with strong alcohol. Another one carried a small metal cup. The bottle was opened. The smell of the alcohol filled the air. Blade spoke slowly, like someone performing a ceremony. This is the first step. He raised the bottle slightly. You drink. Ibuka shook his head weakly. I don't drink. Another underworld member slapped him again. You drink today. But before they could force the bottle into his mouth, another underworld member stepped forward, holding a thick wooden stick. Blade nodded. First, he must prove his loyalty. The boy with the stick smiled wickedly. Stand up. Ibuka slowly stood up, his legs shaking badly. Then, without warning, the stick came crashing down on his back. Ibuka screamed. Ah! Pain exploded through his body. Another strike came immediately. Ibuka collapsed to the ground. Stand up, someone shouted. Another blow landed on his shoulder, another on his back, another across his legs. The beating was brutal, merciless. The underworld members took turns striking him. Ibuka cried loudly, please, please, stop. But no one listened. One of them shouted angrily, this is how everyone joins. Another laughed. You should have joined quietly when we asked. Blood slowly began to stain Ibuka's shirt. His body shook from the pain. His vision became blurry. But still, the beating continued. At that exact moment, miles away in her small house in Enugu, Okiki was still on her knees. Her room was dimly lit. The floor was wet with tears. Her wrapper had become soaked from crying. But she refused to stop praying. Her voice was hoarse, but her prayers were powerful. Father Lord, she cried loudly, every evil plan against my son tonight, destroy it. Her body trembled as she prayed. Any trap set for him, scatter it in the name of Jesus. Her hands were lifted toward heaven. Lord, send help to my son wherever he is. Her prayer grew stronger, more desperate, more intense. She could not explain it, but deep inside her spirit, she knew something terrible was happening, and she refused to stop praying until heaven answered. Back in the bush, Ibuka lay on the ground gasping for breath. His body felt like it was on fire. Pain spread across his back and shoulders. Blade walked closer and crouched beside him. "You see," Blade said calmly, "life becomes easier when you cooperate." Ibuka could barely speak. "Please, let me go." Blade sighed. "You are stubborn." He stood up and looked at the others. "Continue." One of the underworld boys grabbed Ibuka's shirt and dragged him up again. Another forced the bottle of alcohol toward his mouth. "Drink!" Ibuka tried to turn his head away. "I can't." The man forced the bottle harder. "Drink or we break your teeth." Just as they were about to force the bottle between his lips, something unexpected happened. At first it was faint, very faint, a distant noise. Then it grew louder. The sound of police sirens shattered the silence of the night. The underworld boys froze instantly. Blade's head snapped toward the direction of the sound. What was that? The siren grew louder, closer, much closer. One of the underworld members panicked. "Police!" Another shouted, "Run!" Blade's face turned dark. How did they find us? Suddenly, bright headlights burst through the trees. Police vehicles stormed into the bush from different directions. Officers jumped out immediately. "Police! Nobody move!" Flashlights shone everywhere. The underworld members tried to scatter in different directions, but the officers were already surrounding the area. One underworld member attempted to run into the forest. 2 officers tackled him instantly. Another tried to jump into the car, but an officer smashed the door shut. "Hands up!" Within seconds, chaos filled the bush. Officers shouting, underworld members yelling, handcuffs clicking. The entire place became a scene of confusion. Blade tried to run, but 3 officers blocked his path. One officer pointed a gun. "Freeze!" Blade slowly raised his hands. The ritual had ended before it even began. Meanwhile, Ibuka was still lying on the ground. His body was weak. His eyes were half closed. An officer rushed toward him. "Oh my God!" The officer knelt beside him. "This one is badly injured." Another officer quickly called for help. "Bring the ambulance." Ibuka tried to speak, but his voice was barely audible. Everything around him looked blurry. The last thing he heard was someone saying, "Don't worry, you are safe now." Then darkness covered his eyes. Ibuka collapsed into unconsciousness. Later that night, the truth came out. Earlier that evening, a student named Amaka had been walking behind Ibuka at a distance. He had seen everything. He saw the black car stop. He saw the men drag Ibuka inside. Fear gripped him immediately. He knew who those men were. Instead of running away quietly, Amaka made a brave decision. He quickly called the school security office. The security officers immediately contacted the police. One of the underworld members had previously been under investigation, so the police already had information about their possible hideouts. Using that information, they traced the car and arrived at the bush just in time to save Ibuka. The ambulance rushed through the dark roads towards the university hospital. Inside the vehicle, doctors worked quickly. They cleaned Ibuka's wounds, they stopped the bleeding, they placed oxygen over his face. One doctor shook his head. "He is lucky." Another doctor replied, "Very lucky." At that exact moment, Okiki was still on her knees. Her voice had become softer now. Her strength was almost gone, but she continued whispering, "Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord." Suddenly something changed. A strange calm filled her heart. The fear that had gripped her earlier disappeared. A deep peace settled inside her spirit. She slowly wiped her tears, then she whispered softly, "It is well." She did not know why she suddenly felt peaceful. She did not know what had just happened miles away, but heaven knew, because at that exact moment, her son had just been rescued. Her prayers had reached heaven, and heaven had answered. Because sometimes, when a mother cries to God with all her heart, heaven does not stay silent. Heaven intervenes. The sun had barely risen over Enugu when Okiki's phone began to ring. She was in the kitchen that morning, preparing a small pot of pap before getting ready for work. The house was quiet. Dora had already left early for her nursing lectures. Okiki hummed softly as she stirred the pot. But suddenly, her phone vibrated on the small wooden table. She wiped her hand quickly on her wrapper and picked it up. The number was unfamiliar. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello?" A calm male voice spoke from the other end. "Good morning, ma. Are you Mrs. Okiki, the mother of Ibuka Okafo?" Immediately, her heart began to beat faster. "Yes, I am his mother." There was a short pause. Then the man continued. "Ma, your son is currently in the university hospital. The spoon in Okiki's hand fell to the floor. Her body froze. In the hospital? Her voice trembled. What happened to my son? Please don't panic, Ma. He is stable now. But we need you to come immediately. For a moment, Okiki could not breathe. Her chest felt tight. Her mind began to race with terrible thoughts. Was he in an accident? Was he sick? Was he dying? Her hands started shaking. I'm coming right away, she whispered. She did not even bother to finish cooking. She grabbed her bag and rushed out of the house. The journey to the university felt longer than ever before. Okiki entered the first bus she saw heading toward the school. The bus was crowded. People were talking loudly, but Okiki heard none of it. Her mind was filled with fear. Her heart kept repeating the same prayer. Lord, please, let my son be alive. Her fingers clutched her small Bible tightly inside her bag. She closed her eyes. Father, you promised me you would protect my children. Tears slowly rolled down her cheeks. Please don't let anything happen to him. The bus moved slowly through traffic. Every second felt like an hour. Finally, after what felt like forever, the university gate appeared. Okiki jumped down from the bus even before it fully stopped. She ran toward the hospital building. Her legs were shaking. Her breathing was heavy. Inside the hospital, nurses moved quickly through the corridors. The smell of antiseptic filled the air. Okiki rushed to the reception desk. My son, Ibuka Okafo, they called me. The nurse checked a file quickly. Yes, ma. She pointed toward a hallway. Room 12. Okiki's legs felt weak as she walked toward the door. Each step felt heavier than the last. When she finally reached the door, she paused. Her hand trembled on the handle. Then slowly, she pushed the door open. And what she saw broke her heart. Ibuka lay quietly on the hospital bed. His body was covered in bandages. His arm had an IV drip attached. Bruises covered his face. His breathing was slow but steady. For a moment, Okiki stood frozen. Her eyes filled with tears instantly. Then suddenly she rushed forward. My son! Her voice broke as she reached the bed. She held his hand gently. Tears poured down her face. Ibuka? Hearing her voice, Ibuka slowly opened his eyes. Mommy! The moment he saw her, tears formed in his own eyes. Okiki shook her head in disbelief. Who did this to you? Her voice trembled with pain. Ibuka swallowed slowly. The underworld boys, Okiki gasped. Her body shook. She had heard many terrible stories about underworld groups in universities, but she never imagined her own son would face such danger. Her tears continued falling. But these tears were not only tears of pain, they were also tears of gratitude, because despite everything, her son was alive. She lifted her face slightly and whispered, Thank you, Lord. Then she looked back at Ibuka. God saved you.